Long, long, long ago, before lakes lapped the shore of Gitche-Gumee, before runes were part of writing in a faraway land, lived the inhabitants of a village called Salinia. The village was unremarkable and resembled any village of the time, save for its exceptional, singularly unique cathedral. The cathedral itself was unremarkable, and in many ways plain, made of quarried stone like the cathedrals in the neighboring villages, and with much the same design. 'Twas the bell towers that made the cathedral of Salinia exceptional. The towers reached high, high, high in the sky. So high did the towers reach that in the bleakest season of winter and the rainy season of spring, the huge bell towers at the top of the towers were constantly shrouded in clouds.
Shrouded in cloud and silent they were. The villagers rarely glimpsed the tops of the bell towers, and it was said that none alive had ever heard them ring. For it was decreed by those no longer living that this cathedral, with its singular, splendid towers, was a gift to the village, and the bells would ring when a gift was given that would repay the builders of the tower in kind. It was decreed that each eve of Christmas the villagers should gather in the sanctuary and one by one bring forth their gifts to lay on the altar of giving. It was said that when a singular, splendid gift was given, the bell towers of Salinius Cathedral would sound throughout the land.
And so each eve of Christmas the villagers gathered in their finest clothes, and one by one laid their finest gifts upon the altar of giving, and one by one turned to listen for the chime of the bells, and one by one, year after year, decade after decade, they returned to their seats, dejected that their gift was met by silence in the congregation and the sky.
On one such eve of Christmas, the villagers prepared their finest gifts, donned their finest clothes, climbed in their finest carriages, and came slowly to enter the cathedral to take their turn in trying to ring the bells. That night, as the north wind howled and flurries of snow swept from the sky, a young lad stood on the steps of the cathedral with no plans to enter. Steed, his task was to offer to rid boots of mud and dust to shine the shoes of those in their finest before they entered the cathedral doors. The lad hoped to earn pennies that he might go and buy day-old bread and perhaps apples and nuts, so that his brother and sister might have something to celebrate on the day of Christmas. Some looked at the lad with disdain. Some paused to have their footwear polished and dropped pennies into his cup.
At last the villagers were seated on the benches of the sanctuary, and the songs were sung, and the sermon said, and the time of the procession was at hand. The procession always started from the craft guilds and built up to the mayor, and lastly the prince of the land. This year no finer gifts would ever be given, and surely the bells would sound. The miller brought his finest flour, the baker his best bread, the butcher brought a prize pig, the cobbler beautiful boots of the finest, softest leather. As each gift was surrendered at the altar of giving, the giver turned and with upturned ear listened for the sound, and for an expectant moment the people, seeing the quality of the gift, held breath to hear the bong, but only the footsteps of the giver could be heard as the giver returned to their seat.
It came the time of the finest farmer. He had a matched set of oxen, coveted by all who plowed ground and sold seed. He solemnly strode through the door and led his team to the altar. The crowd could not believe the generosity of the gift and thought this might cause the bells to ring. He tied the team and turned with upturned ear. Yet he, too, was met with the disappointing sound of silence.
The cathedral doors opened again, leading a matched team of jet-black steeds with jeweled harness. A wealthy woman marched to the altar as the horses pranced. These fine animals must be worth thousands, the people thought, and surely this gift would cause the bells to chime. The beautiful lady handed over the reins and turned with tilted ear, yet nothing could be heard.
Next, the knight commander of the prince's court stood. He strode to the front and sat on the floor of a wooden case. From the case he lifted a gilded sword that gleamed in the candlelight. The hilt of the sword was made from ivory. On each side were 3 flawless rubies. The people gasped in awe at the beauty of the sword, and each turned an expectant ear. Yet again, all was met with a deafening silence.
The people began to despair as the mayor, the richest citizen of the town, stood from his seat at the front and took a stride to the altar. She opened the fur flap of her frock and took out 2 plum purses and set them on the altar. She united the drawstring, one, and split it on its side. Onto the altar gold pieces clunked, and the people gasped as one at the gift. Other than the sound of that gasp, the air was filled with stillness. Thank you, Recorder.
Finally, the prince and princess rose from their thrones. Hand in hand, they moved to the altar and stood. To all it seemed their hands were empty until they were raised to each other's head, and they lifted their crowns. The people could not believe what their eyes were witnessing as the golden jeweled crowns were placed on the altar. The people sat in awe at the greatness of the gift. And yet again there was the deafening sound of silence.
It seemed another eve of Christmas would pass, and the bell towers of Selenia would again stay silent. The people rose and moved into the aisles, chatting and preparing to disperse for home. Just as the first reached the doors to step out into the cold, the people froze mid-step, for it was almost imagined that the faintest bong of a bell was heard. The people as one cocked an ear to the clouds, as a clearer bong, followed by a louder bong, was heard until a continuous chorus of bells surrounded to be heard throughout the village and all of the surrounding countryside. The people were astonished at the beautiful sound, and as one turned to look at the altar to see who gave what gift that might have caused the bell to ring.
The villagers' laughter and words caught in their throats as their eyes widened in surprise, for up at the altar in the front of the cathedral bowed the young lad. Those closest could clearly see the 7 pennies that had caused the bell towers of Selenia to sing.